Welcome back, Star Pilots, to our third discussion episode. My name is Cal Neuvost.
I am Jaws.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to be discussing the new FAQ, which came with many changes to the game. We'll be talking about the serious nerf, but perhaps in some ways buff in disguise to the Phantom. We'll be discussing the new way that we bring obstacles to a tournament and how they are now kind of part of a squad list.
Some stock list, yes.
And finally, we're going to touch on the ways that we work through collisions with big ships. But let's start off talking about what had been perhaps the most popular ship in the competitive scene, Whisper. Veteran instincts, advanced cloaking device, probably a nice little fire control system, maybe even a rebel captive. I'm getting anxious and annoyed just thinking about it. Yeah. But now it's different.
I just lost the game in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. So the errata is that the Phantom now decloaks at the beginning of the activation phase, and this, to be particular, right after at the beginning of the activation phase, triggers that you'll find on your cards. Right after that, Phantoms decloak, but before anyone else has moved. And so that means that they're going to have to decide
which pilot skill 0 ships.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Even if you've gotten the crit. They're going to have to decide where to decloak before they've seen where anyone else is moving. And this is going to make all kinds of Phantoms, but Whisper especially, significantly harder to fly. Gentlemen, what do you think about this?
Okay, I mean, I am not a particularly huge fan of Whisper and what it's done competitively to the game, although I have, flown Echo quite a bit. A lot of fun with it. I think some people are crying nerf and really crying it loudly. I think it's kind of silly. I think this build that Cal just said, VI, advanced cloaking, maybe gunner or fire control just to guarantee damage to get Whisper's ability trigger, I think that's still the best build for Whisper. I think, now you have less avenues out. Whisper and Echo always had these ways of putting 2 moves in where you have a move on the dial that will work for 2 different decloaks. And then, okay, the board plays out a way that you don't want it, you decloak the safe way, and you either run or you put yourself somewhere out of harm's way.
Recloak.
Or recloak. You always have those great options, and now you can't do that. So, you could end up, I think the biggest thing is now people are going to be scared that they're going to end up with Whisper facing the great nothing and not shooting. If you're clever enough to be able to get a Whisper just uncloaked for a long period of time, that could be big. But I think the ship is still really safe. I think you usually have one move that's going to point you at somebody, and if you're at pilot skill 9, it's hard to kill this ship, even if it's in your arc. If it has 4 dice on green dice and a focus token. So I think not much is going to change about Whisper besides the frequency of it. I think it will scare some people off.
The fact that it's moving first will make it decloaking first rather would make it easier to block. Therefore, how significant do you think that is? Do you think that is not a nerf then in effect?
Well, I think it's actually harder to block the decloaks now because if you were to try to block them,
I mean block the movement.
Oh yeah, the
dial ship. Yeah.
The ship,
now a TIE fighter can barrel roll into
that's what I meant
to block.
I think that's where I see where the nerf would be.
Okay.
Because the ship itself is although it can take the fire control upgrade and have a modified dice, it still can't take the extra focus action. You can have a gunner on there, and it can still miss, and you can still not get the extra the focus token from its ability. My personal opinion is burn, baby, burn. The Phantom has this uncanny ability to just dominate the second half of an entire game. You can feel like you're ahead, you're doing great, taken out some support from the Phantom, and then you're
maybe even got a few shots onto the Phantom.
Maybe you got 2 shots.
Oh, you only need a few more lucky hits.
Maybe you got 3 damage on him. I recently did exactly that. Took on a 2-ship build with a fire spray, Cath, I believe it was, and did 3 damage to the Phantom, and it still destroyed the rest of my ships. Yeah. I had 4 ships. I had 3 ships left, I believe, and the Phantom just dominated the latter half of the game. So.
And I think we'd also agree that before this nerf, it was almost required to build into your list some kind of counter or way to mitigate, not to just see Whisper across the table and go, oh, well, this was fun. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, VI and the pilot skill thing is absurd, and some of my favorite ships sit in that ugly pilot skill range, like Dash Rendar and the IG-88s, which we talked about in the last video, but it's just been so annoying to think like, oh man, I wish I could get to pilot skill 10. I still think Whisper is going to be seen at 9 almost exclusively, but just less of it. You won't be like guaranteed you're just going to run into countless Whisper builds. And even if you do, you're going to have a lot more options about how to shut that ship down, or at least have it in your arc, which has always been on top of its tankiness. If you can't shoot it at all, you'll never destroy the ship. So.
That's a good point. So now that we are going to be seeing less Whispers, what is the obvious replacement of that? We're going to see
Soon-Tier Fel.
Auto Fels. Auto Fels will be the new Whisper, I think, and it's going to dominate.
Yeah, it becomes a better repositioning ship at this point. I still think pure damage Whisper is a better ship, but for people that really want that opportunity to see the board and then put their ship exactly where they need it to be, Soon-Tier will be better at that. He will absolutely be better than Whisper.
So let's talk about some of the things that we may see out of the Phantom more. So there are some things that are better about this. For example, when you're putting in your dial, you can know that you will get to decloak before anyone else gets to change the board state. And so being able to do that, some people have called Echo the new best blocker in the game. I think that sounds pretty interesting. We might also perhaps see some lower pilot skill generic Phantoms. What kind of things do you guys think might come?
Well, I've seen here and there the generic Phantoms in casual play. I still think they're super risky for what they are, because they are not super durable. They have incredible amount of damage, and they draw fire like it's no one's business. It's one of the most glass cannon-y ships in the game with that high offense. So I still think they are really scary, but they can be dodged, and like a Soon-Tier won't worry about a pilot skill 2 or whatever. The lowest I believe is 2.
No, it's 1 and 3 are the 2.
And so those are not going to scare an Arc Dodger. I think that the ship that benefits the most from kind of like freeing it from its sort of archetype is Echo. Because Echo has been sort of glued to VI, even though Echo's in the dumb pilot skills, 6 to 8 is kind of weird. Right. I think Echo now, you have so many weird options with that ability to block, or you still have so many options that people are still not going to have any idea where that Phantom's going to end up. You could still decloak in a way where your entire squad just points in the wrong direction, and they can't reposition to ever cover where Echo's going to go. So Echo can still do insane stuff. I've heard of people doing Lone Wolf on Echo even now, and I think that kind of idea of Lone Wolf, Echo with Recon Specialist just being an obnoxious blocker and still a weird ship to deal with, like the best flanker in the game maybe, in a weird damaging way. So I'm definitely going to mess around with Echo. You, again, won't be as safe though anymore. You won't have that I have 8 options, I can do one that will get me out of every arc. So you will have to play the ship
even more carefully.
Yes.
More carefully than you already have to keep it alive, yes.
So I think we're just going to see less Phantoms. That's basically. There'll be the few creative, brave souls who think really like the blocking aspect.
How brave do you think you'll have to be? Do you really think it's not going to be a competitive archetype?
Whisper I think is going to be fine. I think it just turns people off a little bit. Like, it makes it less of an easy ship to fly, and I don't like to say easy to insult people, but you do have so much leeway with Whisper. Like, you can really mess it up and still be okay. And now people are going to be scared that they don't have that, and so I think Soontir will kind of take that away. So we'll see. There'll be some creative Phantom players, I think.
Yeah, on a scale of 3PO to Han, so you'd think somewhere between there you'd have to be to fly a Phantom still. Okay.
The Queen is dead. Long live Baron Fel.
All right.
It's a Baron Fel.
So I guess we can move on to talk about those obstacles.
Yes,
Sure.
indeed.
So I mean, I kind of am really excited about this. We've had the Debris for so long. We played a bunch of casual tournaments with them, and it was pretty cool. And then, you know, FFG kind of took the wind out of everyone's sails when they said, you know, for the foreseeable future, asteroids. So
Scrambling to start changing the way we were doing our
they've sat in my box for a while, so I'm really excited to see them out. And I think one of the coolest things about it is now we have to list build our obstacles. So you're going to think about what does your opponent want in obstacles, what do you want in obstacles, what are you going to place? And I think one of the funniest things is that you can bring stuff and then start placing your opponent's obstacles. So
Yeah.
I think it could be really fascinating. I don't know what you guys think about that.
That is an interesting dynamic, yeah. How you can pretty much obstacle build against them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can give them the worst options to
Yeah.
put. Like, someone brings the big rock because they, you know, want to center it or they want to ruin your swarm, and you get initiative and you take their big rock and just put it in the corner. It's
Right.
like, okay, you know. So like that's gonna in a ship build where you don't want obstacles, you take the 3 smallest that we have, right, and then you leave those to the other person and take all their big stuff and just stick it in the corner. And like, what's the most that they can do? Place your little obstacles. So I think that's kind of you can do kind of obnoxious things
it's
like that.
It's fascinating how inventive the developers can get with already existing, you know, rules that have been established. That's great.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the different sized obstacles. On the smallest side, we have 2 asteroids and 1 piece of debris. If you really just want obstacles to play as small of a part in the game as possible, you could bring these. We've got 5 medium pieces, including 3 of the asteroids and 2 kind of awkwardly shaped little debris there.
Still qualify with medium,
Yeah.
But most of the big obstacles are debris. We've got 3 big, maybe this one's a little bit in its awkward shapiness. Not sure if that's the biggest, but it definitely stretches about as far.
Yeah, the debris covers quite a lot of space, like horizontally at times, depending on where you place it. Not always the same like mass as the big asteroid.
The big rock that we all know
Everybody's favorite.
and hate and love, depending on who it's hurting. So there are some obvious sorts of plans for this, that Dash is going to want debris, and that if you really can't afford getting stressed because your shuttle dial or your Hawk dial just isn't going to be able to handle it, you're probably going to just stick with asteroids.
Although shuttle players might love the debris because that thing sits on asteroids all the time. Like, sometimes you have to sacrifice a turn turning a shuttle through an asteroid. There might be times where you say, debris, I don't care about the stress. I'm going to do that hard turn right onto that debris. I don't really care.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it. You can play it in so many different ways.
Yeah, you're right. There aren't as many sure things as I feel like X-Wing sometimes has. Oh, if you're going to play this kind of list, definitely do this. And you can really just play it your own way as to whether you like big obstacles or not.
Multiple ways to be successful. Yeah.
I think it's going to play out mostly like it's either going to be really big or really small. I think we're going to see like almost none of the middle-sized ones. You know, your list either wants to maximize the impact of obstacles or minimize.
Right.
Very few are like, I'm going to go in the middle. You know what I mean? So like, I think we're going to see a lot of the big rock. I think almost everyone who's not you know, if you're not concerned about ending up on it, the big rock is going to be everywhere. So I think we might see some super cluttered boards. With
now, one thing that I've been thinking about is with so many lists that are meant to try and solve multiple problems in front of them, for example, Soontir and Mini Swarm, being able to both arc dodge and have that jousting ability means so much. And I first think, okay, well, some like big obstacles that Soontir is going to be able to move around and juke slower opponents around. But I don't want to land my swarm on those. I could lose in a turn. I land my swarm on one of these gigantic things. What kinds of will that push anyone to a compromise kind of shape?
Actually,
or any thoughts?
I mean, no, I actually that's probably the only situation I can think of where you might want that middle ground. I mean, I see debris being loved by control lists clearly. Ioning someone on debris is pretty amazing, and then ioning them again, and they're stuck on stress forever. That kind of thing is great. A lot of big ships kind of don't really they like debris because they can just go right through it and get stressed and not really care. So I think the options are open, and it's pretty insane what's going to happen. So that's a new part of your list. It's like you might have to tell what asteroids you came to a tournament with.
It's part of the battle report. Yeah.
Just trace it onto your list before handing it over to
talked about that.
Yeah,
so they don't, so people don't change obstacles during the tournament.
Yeah,
so
right.
We'll see what happens with that.
Makes a lot of sense.
We'll see what FFG have to say about that. Yeah.
So finally, we want to touch on the new way that we'll be working through the vassal way. I guess it's not that new in some ways of working through large ship collisions. The new rule is that since it's so easy to get a turn template just stuck under one of those bases, that you will line it up with a straight template and use that to get as close as possible to getting your nubs lined up on both sides. This seems like just kind of a good clarity issue. Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to go through this because I thought it was really interesting. Just that it was completely unclear how you were supposed to do big ship collisions. They said this original rulebook had something about the middle stem you're supposed to kind of place over the template, but you can never see it, especially if it's a one turn. And then there was this weird thing where do they collide and when does it happen? And I'm sure everyone's had that weird one turn where you kind of graze another ship, and it's where did that collision occur? So now the Vassal way, which they actually have built into Vassal, are these turn templates that have an infinite extension on them. So now just like that, we can sort of approximate that and actually have the ship move along the template like you would with a small ship. Makes everything super clear. It gets rid of the weird controversies that happened at Worlds about this turn that the Falcon did there. And everything just feels better. I think it was the natural way. I think it was pretty cool that they probably did take that from Vassal. The X-Wing community actually affects, how the rules develop and stuff like that. I think that was a really cool addition, and it'll make things a lot easier to do in the future.
So overall, I think some good improvements to the game.
I think they did a great job to FAQ.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
For NYC X-Wing, my name's Cal Neuvost.
I'm Jaws.
And I'm Mike.
Good night, Internet.
Little kid's birthday party.